Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Sick of This Shit Publications, hosting Nick Paro, not your dad, for Intelligent Masculinity with my friend and a veteran Marine Corps, combat veteran, advocate, ally, Joe Plenzler. Welcome to the Intelligent Masculinity series here on Sick of This Shit Publications and co-broadcasted on Banner and Backbone.
Awesome.
How are you today, Joe? And do you mind introducing yourself to anyone in the audience who hasn't really met you yet or maybe new to you?
Yeah, it's great to be here, Nick. It's always good to see you, and I love our conversations. You forgot to mention fellow Dungeons and Dragons aficionado from like back in the day.
Fellow
Yeah, I
nerd.
immediately saw his shirt today, and I was just like had a good laugh. Yeah. So who am I? I'm currently an executive leadership coach. I own my own business. I'm a veteran advocate. I kind of get involved in rousing the rabble from time to time on different veteran causes. Believe in democracy and maintaining it, so I get involved there. Local elections are important, right? I think I'm a big advocate for volunteering to run elections and educate yourself on the process, so you learn how safe and secure our elections are. And I spent 20 years in the Marine Corps. I spent 4 years as an infantry officer, and then another 16 as a public affairs officer. I went to Iraq in 2003, Afghanistan in 2013, and spent 5 years in Japan on 4 different assignments and been to more than 30 countries. So maybe that's a little bit about me.
You're,
I like
you're
to
a
play
bit of
guitar. Yeah, so like big fan
you're a
of
bit of a world
punk
traveler.
rock.
Nice. Are you going to be in attendance to the Dropkick Murphy event on Friday?
I would love to. I can't. I'm like double booked that day. So I
Oh,
will
man.
be cheering on from the sidelines and promoting that show as much as I can from the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'll say this. I'm fortunate enough to be one of the veterans that does get to go
That's great.
to the event.
Yeah.
I'm being sponsored by Veterans Fighting Fascism to attend, and I'm so excited to be able to
Yeah.
be there to represent and to get to see Dropkick Murphy for the first time.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you didn't get to go on June 6th of last year.
No,
We
I
had them
didn't.
on the mall. Well, yeah, great guys. It's so funny when you meet them. They're so like just kind.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they get up on stage and they just turn into these freaking pirates, man. It's like, yeah, it's really it's a charge to watch them just switch it on and just go for it, man. So I'm really a little bit jealous, to be honest with you. So
I'm so glad that I'm so excited to go.
yeah,
It's so cool to be able to get involved. And I'll actually get to be on the ground in Minneapolis and talk to folks and
yeah,
others in our community, and be able to get more involved and help spread the awareness from our group like that.
yeah,
And that's a big part of it is we're trying to be a part of the conversation.
hmm
And I think one of those big pieces of being part of that conversation is talking about masculinity
yeah,
and men's issues that we created for ourselves, but men's issues that we don't need to be putting the onus on others to
mm,
fix. To people have been calling them out. They have been shouting from the rooftops on some of the toxicities that are going on, and I want to change it.
yeah,
Um, and instead of arguing and saying no, we're not doing these things, I'm listening and
yeah,
we're learning and we're growing. And I've gotten the chance to know you a little bit through the last couple weeks and got introduced to you by Chris Goldsmith
yeah,
um, and I've had you on the Banner and Backbone side where we talk some local stuff and about like local involvement and say what you might do around if you were to have advocated to Governor Shapiro at the time about the Black Panthers. I remember that was part
yeah,
of our conversation about like local engagement and actually listening, just sitting down and listening to what the needs are and the
mm,
concerns are, and then acting on them
right,
and being constructive. And I hope this is kind of a continuation in ways of that conversation.
Yeah.
about those local things and those engagements and how being a man and how you see yourself being a man and represented in it. And before we go too far, today's primary day in a lot of
Mm,
places.
yeah.
And I wanted to get your thoughts on what's going on today, how you feel about the trustworthiness of the elections that are going to be happening and the
Mhm.
primaries that are going on. Um, and what do you advocate people do today?
Yeah. Well, a couple of thoughts kind of immediately come to mind. One is, rest assured, we have a pretty damn great system of elections here in the United States, right? There's a lot of people casting aspersions on, like, oh, elections are rigged and all this other stuff. And I got to tell you, like, I'm a natural born skeptic. I'm a Gen X punk rock kid who joined the military because he didn't trust his government, right? And in around 2016 was the first time I ever voted in person, because every other election since 1995 had voted by military absentee ballot,
Mhm.
and which is also a very safe and secure way to vote. Um, but it was a moving thing. I mean, my wife and I were in the AME church in our neighborhood, and watching our fellow citizens exercise probably the most fundamentally American thing is your right to vote, right? And something that we spent 20 years in uniform, defending. And my wife looked at me. She's like, you know what? I want to be part of this next election. She's like, I want to help run elections and volunteer to do this. And I was like, that's a great idea. I said, let me know how it goes. And stupidly, I didn't follow her lead like I should have. And she came back from that. And this is a woman, who spent 20 years in the Marines, had done a combat tour in Iraq, had, traveled all over. And she said, that was the most significant thing I've done as an American adult in my life. And I'm like, wow, that is a moving statement, And I was like, all right, I'm in. I want to be part of it next cycle. And so we did. And, we went into the state of Maryland in our county, went down to the county board of elections and sat through like 4 hours of training. They handed us a manual that was literally an inch thick about running a polling site. And it was Marine proof, man. If you could read, I mean, you could follow every step of the way to like unpack all the equipment, set it up, check people in, hand them their ballots, make sure that they're tabulated, report the results, two-person integrity around everything, minimum, and I was like, wow, they're doing it right here. They really are. And we moved to Virginia, did the same thing, so now I've got 2 points of reference in 2 different states as an election official. And you quickly realize like how comically absurd a conspiracy would have to be in order to throw an American election, right? And so for anybody that's like got questions about it, my first response is, have you volunteered? And of course, the answer is always no. And then I'm like, okay, well, maybe I ought to, give some thought to it, because it's way more fun than jury duty. Yeah, it's a long day, but like, you're going to quickly understand and appreciate like who's running your elections, and it's your neighbors, right? It's people just like you in your community. America has something like 1.2 million volunteers that serve in our elections every cycle. And ultimately, if good people like you don't volunteer for elections, your county will have fewer sites, longer lines, and ultimately less democracy for everybody, right? Because election day is not a day off in the United States. It should be, and a lot of people have to take away time from work to go vote. So sometimes that's not, it's not reimbursed time either by a lot of their employers. So
Yeah.
Get involved in the process is the big message. And then with primaries. One of the problems I think in our political system is gerrymandering, where
Mhm.
where districts are so tilted in favor of one party or the other that the primary is really where it's at, and people need to win that primary in order to win a seat in the House of Congress, or in Congress, either the House of Representatives or the Senate come November. So really, for many states, you got to win the primary, and then the general election is generally given. So this is probably the most important election in many areas. Yeah. So again, please get out and vote, because again, if you don't get out there and vote, you know who does, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. And so I wanted to come at it because I come at the elections not so much that the physical election itself would be stolen,
yeah.
like, and I'm not saying things were stolen.
Mhm.
I am saying though that what we consider free and fair may not be free and fair,
Mm.
and because we do have a lot of restrictions on voting in our country and how you can access the elections with, let's say, the SAVE Act.
Mhm.
I know that hasn't passed into law, but that, in my eyes, that would be a Jim Crow era poll tax law
Yeah,
on specifically on women, and that takes
100%. Yeah.
and trans folks and gay and anyone who's changed their name, pretty
Mhm.
much anybody who's changed their name, which historically would be those who do not look similar
Yeah.
to us, white men, because we don't ever change our names for anything. Men
Yeah.
in general
Yeah.
don't normally change their names, um, and so everybody else gets impacted by it. And to
Yeah.
me, that would be a voter suppression and a type of rigging for an
Yeah.
election, but one that we allow to be legalized. Um, what do you think? Or I'd love your thoughts on the SAVE Act,
Mhm.
and what we can do as men to advocate for those around us,
Yeah.
be it our spouse or just be it anyone in America who doesn't have the same privilege as we do of never having changed our last name.
Yeah, for sure. And it is a poll tax because I just renewed my passport, right? It costs $130. Not everybody in this country has $130 of disposable income to get a passport. In the state of Maryland and also the state of Virginia, Maryland has a slightly different way of doing things. In Virginia, you've got to show some sort of identification that matches with the poll book, right? So your county registrar has a database of everyone who's registered to vote in the county, and in that process, you have to prove that you're an eligible U.S. citizen, right? Um, Typically, most people use their driver's license when they come in the state of Virginia to show who they are. Some people have voter ID cards, right, which doesn't have a picture, but is sent by the state because not everybody drives, right? There are people who, for a myriad reasons, affordability, disability, lack of desire to drive, right, uh, um, don't have a driver's license. So to have some sort of other alternate identification. Um, we keep track of who checks in, right? And so if, like, Nick, you come in to vote and you're issued a ballot, if somebody else comes in and says that they're Nick Paro, the system already shows like Nick's already voted, right? So that person will get a provisional ballot, and then an investigation will be started to say, hey, who actually voted, right? The provisional ballot will be set aside, and the cost for that is pretty severe. It's a felony, right? To
Mhm.
do that. So I mean, when you think about the risk versus benefit analysis and the psychology of doing that, for somebody to like risk a felony, to vote in an election that they shouldn't for some politician on one issue or the other, is just ridiculous, right? Because the penalty for that is pretty severe. And those things are very rare, right? 99% of the time, or higher, the person coming in stating their address and where they are matches their ID. And again, if it doesn't, say they moved and forgot to let the county know, they get a provisional ballot, and then there's documentation of that, and that ballot doesn't get counted until everything lines up, right? Um, so yeah, but yeah, Save Act's garbage. I think we have other ways in play right now that are safe and secure for people to vote, and it doesn't require a passport to do it.
Yeah.
And how can we, like you said, as men lead on this? Yeah, I mean, the people that it's going to impact most are probably more conservative women, right? Because women on the left of the aisle, like, typically don't change their names, or less likely to when they get married, right? So in many ways, like, I think the SAVE Act is going to impact more conservative women disproportionately. But is that by design, by the drafters of the bill? I don't know, because there's some people on that side of the aisle that think women shouldn't vote at all.
Yeah. And I think it's a bit by design, but I also think it's a bit of a double-edged sword anyway.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because if you cut yourself off from having the access to vote, yet the other political side has the access to vote, because
Mhm.
even if you have changed her name, like my wife changed her last name
Mhm.
to mine, and she has all of her paperwork, all of her
Yeah.
documentation, every single piece since she was a kid. She has a passport. Women on and those who are tend to be on the left side of the political spectrum also tend to have their passports in general more likely than
Yeah.
those who are not,
Yeah.
because we travel and we experience other cultures. And that's one of the reasons we remain progressive in our views or liberal in our views is because we want to experience other cultures.
Yeah.
And having a passport allows us to do that.
Mhm.
And so I think it is a bit of a double-edged sword, probably on purpose, because, like I said, they don't want women to vote.
Yeah. I mean, the antidote. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time in American history that shady politicians would try to put their fingers on the scales of elections and justice. And I mean, we've had times where in our history, look back into the 1800s of how elections were run, what politicians did to get people in, how people would vote early and vote often in some areas, right, in some cities. Um, that wouldn't be the first time that happened. But the antidote to it is understand what the law is. Make sure that you are registered. Check early before you go to the polls and give yourself enough time to adjust. Because even if they do pass that law, if you have enough time to react, to make sure that you are signed up and registered and have all the things in play and beat them at their own game. You know what I mean? So, and in such numbers where the results are undeniable.
Yeah. And I think that's the big one is it's plus 30. In my mind, we have to be plus 30 or it's nothing. Like if we're not winning pretty much everything by plus 30 that means we don't have the opportunity to win a supermajority.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about primaries. Like, I think we talked previously about the library fight here or some I mean, these folks straight up are book banners, right? They wanted to control what you and I read in our public library funded by our tax dollars. And they didn't like that, the library within the walls of the library had books about LGBTQ lifestyles, right? The library made some accommodations, said like, hey, we can't separate this as a separate section because that's discrimination, but we can create a young adult section, right? And you as parents are always free to say what books your kids read and what they don't, or what you want the library to ask. If you're not with your child, permission for minors to check out certain things, totally fine, and that wasn't good enough. And they wanted to like purge the library of this stuff, right? And, what was interesting was that, our county is about 30 or 70% Republican, 30% Democrat in any election is usually the way it goes. Pretty rural, pretty conservative. But the Dems were like, we're tired of this. And even though we're few in numbers, we can swing elections if we get behind a centrist candidate. And they found some centrist Republicans who were like, yeah, this is government overreach. This is bullshit. We don't want county bureaucrats making this decision for us. That is our right as citizens to decide. Just like, John Adams said, like the freedom to read, think, speak, and write, fundamental American principles. And so they kind of found a common ground on that. And they found some centrist R candidates. The Republicans ran, the Democrats swung the weight behind there, and they primaried the incumbents by more than 20 percentage points each, right? So like when people are tired of this toxic bullshit and this divisive bullshit and can rally around things that they have in common that they both value, like our public library is a community institution that helps people gain a better education regardless of their means, that's a powerful thing. And if that can be done out here in rural Virginia, my thought is, my God, how can we scale this up to the rest of the country, right?
No, that's a big thing, is the scale up to the rest of the country. And to be honest, I think we're doing it in some areas. And however, I think one of the limiting factors for some of us is, say, closed primaries, and the idea that unless you're in that party, you can't vote, which really restricts access because it's the parties telling the people that they can't vote. And in my eyes, the parties are just a mechanism. The voting shall not be infringed. And the parties shouldn't be able to say, no, you can't vote in these primaries. What are your, like, how do you
love it? I'm in an open primary state. Virginia has open primaries. I voted.
Oh, lucky.
I'm an independent. Like, I'm a diehard, like, you're going to have to work your ass off for my vote. And I'm not voting for one party just because of who you are, right? Just because of tribalism. And I've been that way for a long time. I voted for both Republicans and Democrats at different, levels of office. I've helped friends run for office in both parties. And yeah, open primaries are the way to go because political parties are private clubs, right? They set their own rules. They set their own agendas.
Mm,
And so if you were going to take taxpayer dollars to fund your private club's activity, yeah, every single eligible voter should be allowed to vote in one primary or the other, right?
yeah.
And make that decision, because otherwise independents get completely disenfranchised from the process. If I'm not a Republican or Democrat, then I can't choose who's going to be in the primaries when the shit's already so gerrymandered. You know what I mean? So yeah, and sometimes I voted in the primary contrary to like who I was really going to vote for um, on election day, just because I wanted to send a message, be part of like sending a contrary message to the other party, like your extreme candidates are bullshit. And if they see that, more centrist candidates in their party are getting a significant number of votes, that does send a message, right? So
Yeah.
there's some signaling when people act in unison on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's an important point, is being able
Mm-hmm.
to cross that line and say, hey, I don't agree with this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to send a message that is meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And because you can sway an election if enough people are able to vote one way or the other for a different party than that they are registered for,
Yeah.
because they're tired of the ultra extreme on one
Mm-hmm.
side. So they go, instead of voting for their own Democratic, let's say Democratic Party candidate, they vote for a Republican, just like you
Mm-hmm.
said.
Yeah.
That changes the game. Um, and it can change who is on the ballot come November, and who they see or what they see as electable come November, even if that candidate does end up winning over the one
Yeah.
that you're doing your no, don't vote Nick Paro. I am not on any ballots right now. So don't vote for Nick Paro. You'll waste
Yeah.
your vote. Arkansas already has, where Arkansas is ready, and the Democratic Party's not even doing a primary this
Mm-hmm.
year in Arkansas, at least in
Yeah.
our area. They have we have an election for a special election
Mm-hmm.
for a Senate seat in the state, um, but yeah, like, go vote where you can,
Yeah.
and when you can.
Yeah. Every election that you are eligible to vote for 100%.
Mhm.
100%. And I mean, that's why things like open primaries are super important, because it forces candidates to the middle, right?
Yeah.
Ranked choice voting forces candidates to the middle. I mean, because like with closed primaries, what it encourages candidates to do is court the most diehard extreme views within their party, right? And espouse that, right? And after, when they run on that, then they're kind of beholden to that thing, even if they don't personally feel that way. Now, I've seen friends struggle with that, running for House of Representatives, running for U.S. Senate, where they're like, my God, like, but they're in a lot of places, it's like, yeah, you're not going to win the primary unless you get on board with the current trend, right?
Mhm.
Because who's coming out in primaries? Diehards, right? So that's why it's important, like for everyone to vote in primaries, for open primaries and the rest of it, and getting rid of gerrymandering is another thing, right? Like it's just like a horrible thing. We've got better ways of doing business with that, but we've entered this nuclear arms race of gerrymandering now, where like Texas is going to like carve out some more Republican seats, and then California's going to counter, and then another state's going to change the map to favor their party, and then Virginia's going to do it, and it's just like that is no way to run a country for sure. So
No. Yeah, and a lot of this goes back into the masculinity stuff that we're talking about, because all it
mm-hmm.
is a power grab.
Yeah.
And toxic masculinity teaches us that that is the way to go, or as I have
Mm-hmm.
started calling it too, is authoritarian masculinity,
Yeah.
because it's shaped on the authoritarian model of domination over protection, or
Mm-hmm.
domination over stewardship. Um, and I think stewardship is what we should be aiming for as men.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, is we guide and we help and we care and we
Yeah.
promote the growth of, not just for ourselves but for others. And that's what stewards do, is they
Yeah.
care for things. And that's part of voting, is being a steward of democracy. And we're talking about this too because welcome to primary season. Everybody has to vote. Please go
Mm-hmm.
vote. This is the most important election in American history. Do not skip these elections. If you do, your voice may forever be silenced.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we were always like, one election away from slipping, right? And that's like something that I am concerned with. It's a higher order model, right? Like, if it's just kind of like might makes right, and I'm going to take what I can from everyone who I can. I mean, what a shitty environment to live in. And we've all been kind of subject to that, I think, at some point in our lives, whether it was you're in grade school and somebody stole your lunch, or bullied you on the playground, or all that other stuff. And it's just kind of like, if we don't insist on a better society that kind of helps everybody, then that's what we're going to get, right? It's like, who's got the bigger muscles, who's got the bigger, who's got more guns, who's more organized, who can take what they want. And it's just not really a society worth living in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so one of the reasons, like you said, it's not a society worth living in. Like, it's a bad society that we're going towards. It's a bad world order that we're going towards, where might makes right, and you bully everybody into what you get. And so I'm trying to help create a environment and a case study in masculinity that's different, that shows what it can and is doing to combat that type of fragile authoritarian masculinity. So for everyone in the audience, welcome again to Intelligent Masculinity. We're going to be talking our normal questions throughout this series. I don't think Joe has, I know you have access to the doc, but Joe has not been here for many of the shows, so he doesn't know the questions. So this is going to be fun. And it's a little bit different too. So the first 4 questions are more on the serious side. A little bit, it builds you into the masculinity discussion, and it's a lot of what and many of it starts in what we've talked about, but it also is going to build off that and experiences throughout life. And then the final question is a lightning round of 4 questions based on the Mulan's I'll Make a Man Out of You. It's our Be a Man section. And it's sort of a lightning clarion call action section for what are these specific, or what do these more esoteric ideas mean to you? And how can you apply them in your life?
And that's the old Donny Osmond song, or?
I believe so. Gotcha. It's a fun, I grew up on this song. Like, I was in high school when it was big, and we were and I was a choir kid, and so we sang it all the fucking time. It's the Let's Go Girls for kids, for men, and it's our call to action, and we're in a call to action moment. And Joe is a great person for this call to action moment, because you're out here putting yourself out here right now. You're founded in truth. You're talking about issues that are important, and you're being really authentic. And I want to dig into your story, and let people know who you are, and where you've come from, and how you've gotten to this point in your life. So let's dig into it a little bit, Joe.
Sure. We'll start with question 1.
Yeah, question 1 here is, who has been one of the most influential masculine figures in your life, and why? And I specifically put masculine over male, because masculinity and femininity don't always equate to male or female. They can be anywhere in between. And this can be a positive or negative influence.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think, I don't know, like most kids I grew up with, your dad is kind of like your first figure. You kind of either win or lose the genetic lottery by who you get born to, right? And how much they care about you. My dad was an engineer, super analytical guy, not so emotionally connected. Came from a family of scarcity. His dad was the first in his family to go to college, or actually he didn't even go to college. He talked his way. He wasn't a high school graduate. He talked his way into the local university's drafting program and got trained in that, and then went out and got a job. So I come from a long undistinguished line of Northwest Ohio factory workers and foundry workers and things like that. So, but I think my dad certainly cared, make sure we had food and did our homework and went to school and provided what he could. My grandfathers, largely, on my mom's side, lifelong factory worker. My dad's side, started out as a factory worker and then ended up being a draftsman and designing machines. Looking at their examples in different ways, and like everyone, they're kind of messy. Everyone has their own strengths and learning edges, in areas where we all come up short. Especially for my dad's father, is like, I just remember him. He was a self-made dude. I mean, kind of was able to, buy a house, feed a family. Using his head rather than his hands, but he was always like, my dad and my grandfather would get in political arguments over at the dinner table. My grandfather was a lifelong Democrat. My dad was like kind of a new Republican, and my grandfather was always like, yeah, he said, but those fat cats, they'll always look out for themselves. Who's looking out for the little guy, And that always stuck with me, man, is like, who's looking out for, the people in our society that need the most help? Who's looking out for the people who are starting out at the bottom rungs of the socioeconomic ladder? And he's absolutely right, man. Like, that lesson, and I've got a picture of him in my office here of him as a boy with his uncles, who are all World War I veterans. Because my grandfather was born in 1916. But when we went home, my dad's moving to a new house with my mom, a new condo. They're kind of moving into a senior living facility, and down in the basement, I found like one of my grandfather's factory wrenches, right? So that naturally just kind of went in the bag to take back here as a kind of piece of personal family anthropology, but it's a reminder, right? It's a reminder of those ethics and values of loyalty and caring for others. My grandfather was involved in a lot of charitable kind of neighborhood organizations within his Polish Catholic neighborhood, right? And so that kind of spirit of generosity and hey, we're all kind of in this together, and why don't we help each other out while we're at it, right? Because ultimately, that's what makes human society successful. From 40,000 years ago, when we're living as hunter-gatherers, sharing, was a survival tactic, right? Like, you go out today and you're hunting and gathering, and I'm hunting and gathering, and I don't find shit. You get an antelope, right? I get to eat today because we don't have refrigeration, right? You can hoard it all, but it's just going to rot, right? So what good is it? So you share, and then tomorrow I have a good day and you have a bad day, I share with you, right? That's the way we go. And I think somebody was talking about that one day of just like the influence of greed, and not knowing when enough's enough. And there's like, if we were looking at chimpanzees and one chimpanzee hoarded all the bananas and hid them from all the other chimpanzees when they're starving, we would say, like, what mental illness does this chimpanzee have? But when billionaires do it, people are like, oh, it's like the American dream. It's like, no, like, that is not, right? You talk about masculine influences, I guess. Aaron Feuerstein, I don't know if you ever came across his example. He's called the Mensch of Alden Mills. And the story I remember is that, he was a mill owner in New England, and he had invented Polartec, the fabric that, for jackets, outdoor stuff, forgot to patent it. But he had a factory in that town, and that factory made his family wealthy. And the factory burned down, right? And his board of directors is like, all right, Aaron, we've been telling you for years, it's time to pack it up. Let's move this to Mexico, Vietnam, whatever. And he was like, no. And they're like, what? And they're like, I'm rebuilding here. And they're like, you got to be shitting me. Like, we're moving this shit overseas. And he's like, no, we're staying here. And he said, my family wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for these folks. And while that factory is being rebuilt, he paid like 50% salary to everyone who is out of work because the factory burned down, right? And his thought was like, what am I going to do with all this money if I'm not doing good with it? He said, am I going to wear 2 suits of clothes at the same time? Am I going to eat 5 meals instead of 1 at dinner? Like really, what good is it? Um, and so that kind of really makes me think. So like when you look at folks who have done well, if they're not turning around and spreading that peanut butter pretty thin to make sure everybody gets a little bit, what the hell are they doing? Yvon Chouinard at Patagonia is another good example of, I think, of like an ethical billionaire. I mean, he started out as a dirtbag rock climber in Yosemite. I mean, literally eating cat food and living in a van to go rock climbing. Decided to start making some pitons, sold them. That did well. Started Black Diamond. That company did well. Sold it. Started Patagonia. Right. And now their mission is to like, how do we save this planet? Because unless we do that, nothing else matters. So one thing that, like, from him that really stuck out to me is like, in order to be good, you have to do good. And his definition of evil is more like Edmund Burke. It's like the ability to do good and not doing it. Right. Mm-hmm. So evil doesn't have to be a specific act. It just has to be the ability to make a better decision and choosing not to. Right. So I don't know. I probably gave you.
I like letting people ramble a little bit because we get into some of these amazing, like, not first right off the top of your head thoughts for the masculinity examples. And I love this idea of like because I think you and I have talked about this before. And if we haven't, it's something that I know about, is the fact that the U.S. is founded on collective wealth of our founding progenitors gave and collected all their wealth together so they could pay the military, so that they could pay for roads to be built, so that they could pay for everything. They collectively gathered all their wealth. Our most prosperous times have been when we collected the most from those with the most. It sounds like from the example you got wasn't the required to give. It was I want to contribute to my community. I don't want to hoard. I want to contribute back. And that's a really powerful lesson.
Yeah. I mean, I joke around saying that I grew up on a country club, as a kid, but I wasn't the guy at the pool. I was a caddy carrying rich dudes' bags, right? And so you learn a lot about people when you're 12 years old, slugging a heavy-ass golf bag for some rich dude in 90-degree heat. And you learn how they treat people, right? Like some, well, some not so well, some abysmally, right?
Yeah.
So I have a lifelong. I'm not a huge golf fan as a result of it. Don't really like country clubs or the exclusiveness that they try to cater to. But it's all formative stuff, right?
Yeah. So flipping that coin to the feminine side of the discussion, intelligent masculinity is a better humaning topic. It's we learn from all sides of our emotions, from our physicality, from everything. And the feminine aspects, or what we attribute, at least in our language, to feminine aspects, or societally to feminine aspects, are really important. And shape a lot of us in some of the best ways. And so, who has been one of the most influential feminine figures in your life?
Yeah, I'll give a really expected answer. My mom, for sure, 100%. My grandmother on her side was fantastic. Like, we loved going over her house. She was fun. She cared for us. We always felt like, it was a great place to be. We were accepted. We were safe. She wanted to be with us, right? My dad's mom, suffered bouts of depression. We didn't have quite the same relationship with her. But unfortunately, like, the grandmother that we were really tight with had a massive stroke in 1980 that left half of her body paralyzed, and she spent the next 10 years as a vegetable, unable to communicate. Right, like, kept alive in a nursing home. I mean, there's a whole another thing. And she always used to say, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And boy, did that come unfortunately true for her. But she smoked a lot too, and that kind of contributed to the stroke that she had. But that really kind of was a real eye opener at in 1980 when I was 9 years old. I would also say the women in the mountaineering club I was in college, right? I was kind of brought up, like, my parents were kind of old school though, like, with gender norms. My dad kind of had, probably like a 55-60% vote in all things. You know, my mom, when she was brought up, you know, in her Polish Catholic neighborhood, acceptable career choices were nurse, teacher, secretary, you know, stuff like that. Not like journalist, astrophysicist, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, kind of like that 1950s male James Bond archetype was kind of like a cool thing. Like men drank whiskey and beer and, you know, like went hunting and like all this other stuff, right? Kind of like these gender norm expectations. What was really cool is when I was in college, I really got into first caving, you know, splunking, cave exploring. Then we had a mountaineering club, and believe it or not, Columbus, Ohio, at the Ohio State University. And kids were getting into some pretty serious, like, adventures, you know, from there, you know, rock climbing spring, summer, fall. And then in the winter, we take a trip out to the Rockies and try to like go up a 14,000 foot peak. You know, I'm talking like technical stuff. like we climbed Long's Peak in the winter of 94, up a non-standard route that was a little bit dicey. We tried to get up the Grand Teton in Wyoming in 95 and got up to about 11,500 feet and got completely blown off the mountain by weather and avalanche hazard. So, and in that, it was kind of cool because, you know, rock climbing is a fairly physical thing. It involves a lot of risk because, like, rock climbing accidents don't end well typically, right?
Yeah.
Usually it involves at a minimum broken bones, concussions, cracked skulls. But mostly if you're falling from anything above like 40, 50 feet, you're probably going to die. So it is like a real do not fuck around kind of business. And what I noticed is that something particular is that like easily 1/3 of the club are women, right? And one thing about rock climbing is that you can try to muscle up a rock face, but typically technique is what gets you there, right? And women with a lower center of gravity had certain advantages. You know, there was no kind of like dudes do better at this. In fact, you know, I was climbing at the same year that Lynn Hill, who's a famous climber today, freed the nose on El Capitan, which was, you know, free climbing.
That's cool.
You're able to, you know, climb it without falling the whole way up. And it was said like it can never be done. And there's a famous video of Lynn Hill saying, "It goes, boys." Like it goes. And so sorry, I got some construction noise in the background here. Hopefully the mic's not picking it up.
No,
but
can't
you know,
hear
that
it
was
at all.
yeah. So some of my early climbing heroes are like Lynn Hill, Catherine Destiville, who's done some amazing mountaineering climbs and things like that. And it was kind of like, wow, these are people to admire, right? This is who, as a climber, I want to be like. And you know, at certain points, I was a fairly mid-grade climber. For people that are familiar with like rock climbing, the Yosemite decimal system, I could lead comfortably probably like 5.7, 5.8 routes on traditional gear. That's not going to mean a whole lot to most people, but you know, routes get a lot harder, right? And I would climb with women who were better climbers than I was, who were more confident in leading and taking that risk. And so sometimes I'd look at a route and be like, yeah, I'm just not feeling it. And my friend Hannah or my friend Jenna would be like, yeah, I could do it. Like, you know, and they would take the sharp end of the rope and I would belay them up, you know, and then they would drag my ass to the top from belaying from the top. And I was just kind of like, cool, you know, or we'd be out mountaineering in the wintertime and women would be out there carrying the same load as dudes, you know, and during the same hardship and doing well. And everybody having a good time. There wasn't like this like weird divide, like boys sports, girls sports, men's sports, women's sports. So it's just kind of like we were all, you know, they refer to mountaineering and climbing as kind of like conquistadors of the useless, right? You know, there's no rational good reason to go climb a mountain or subject yourself to the objective hazards on a rock face. I mean, you do it for the experience of it.
Yeah.
And if you die doing it, you know, typically people look at that as a pretty selfish act, right? But you know, there was a magic to that. And then, you know, I noticed like with the guides, professional guides, there's a similar camaraderie, you know. And then I go into the Marine Corps infantry and all of a sudden, like, you know, the language shifted to like, don't be a pussy, right? Don't be a skirt, you know. I'm like, wow, where's this coming from? Like, all of a sudden all the insults were female and things female were pejorative, right? And I'm like, wow, this is really kind of fucked up. Like, where's this coming from? And from some dudes, I think their only model is woman as mom, woman as teacher, authority figure, woman as girlfriend, or sexual conquest, but not as peer, not as competitor, not as equal. And I noticed, like, from folks who came from very conservative, very religious households, they tended to have more of a preponderance of those views, right? Man first, woman second. And my parents, like, I would say it's probably more like a 55-45 split in a lot of decisions. But when my mom dug her heels in on stuff, man, things would not change, right? Like, so maybe that was kind of like, but definitely, like, traditional gender roles were at play. But like that really impressed me. I was like, wow, there's women out here who, in the Mountaineering Club who were like as good, if not better than me, and I was willing to, kind of accept their lead on a route to like be able to do what I wanted to do, right? Which is climb. So like I just didn't get it, and even when I was in the Marine Corps, I met my wife there. She was a young second lieutenant when I was a first lieutenant out at 29 Palms. And there were only like 4 female officers on the entire base. It's out in the middle of the Mojave. Like if you're a female officer there, you're either at the comm school, at the headquarters, or you're a naval nurse or doctor over at the hospital. So there was like a lot of competition for dateable women, and boy, did the tribe turn on me when I started dating her. It was crazy. Like, all of a sudden I wasn't one of the dudes because I didn't want to hang out with them on a Friday night after being in the field for 2 weeks with them. Like, I'm like, no, man, like, I don't want to go sit in your shitty apartment on your shitty couch drinking cheap beer when I could be driving down to Palm Springs with a hot girlfriend. like, where's the competition here? What's the choice? But it got so bad I ended up stopping. I stopped going to battalion social events because they were so shitty about it.
That's awful.
Yeah, but it's just kind of like it forces you to make some decisions, and you find out who your friends really are.
Yeah.
But
So,
apparently I was pussy whipped, or I was a sellout, or whatever, because like I didn't want to hang out with the dudes. So this bros before hoes kind of bullshit. I was just like, nope, not having it. Which was easy for me as a punk rock kid. I was just like, well, fuck you guys. I'm gonna do my own thing anyway because that's what I want. What I want to do. But yeah,
the man can't hold me down.
Yeah.
And so with that, like, moving on to, we'll try and get through as many questions as we can. I don't want to keep you too long, depending on how much time you've got. If you can go a little bit longer, we'll try and stick around for a bit. These can run a little long if they need to. But our next big question is based on all of this. This leads perfectly into it. Is building from those masculine and feminine figures that you've had in your life that are incredibly powerful and meaningful for you. If you were to be given the term intelligent masculinity as a concept, what would that mean to you from what you've learned?
I gotta be honest with you. I had to look up the term and what it meant, because like it's not something that I was immediately familiar with as a title or as a construct. But like, when I started looking into things like emotional awareness, like, what am I experiencing, and can I name it, and can I, regulate it, right? Like, that's important. Self-awareness, how do I show up, and what's my impact on other people? Taking accountability, having the capacity for empathy for other people, right? So, the capacity to get out of your own head and put yourself and try to do the best you can to see the world from somebody else's perspective, right? I'm 100% behind that. Like, another construct, resilience and adaptability. That resonated with me because, like, I'm a big believer. I'm a huge, like, I love science. Like, ever since I saw Carl Sagan's Cosmos in the 4th grade, like, religion really didn't do much for me anymore. This ability of, and Charles Darwin had a famous quote. He said, "It's not the strongest or swiftest; it's the most adaptable to changes in the environment that succeed, right, as a species." And so, that's one thing that was like really resonated in my head throughout the pandemic, was like, there's something to be learned from this experience, as potentially as dangerous as it is for a lot of people. It sucks. We're kind of all sequestered. We're kind of all isolated. But what can I learn from this, right? So yeah. So I think that's important. And also, like, some guys, and I went through, arguably the Marine Corps' toughest training and its hardest school, which is the infantry officer course. And, our way of doing business before I even got there, like the hardest physical thing I've done in my life to that point wasn't in the military. It was actually on the Grand Teton, making a 17-hour movement up a mountain with a heavy pack and thigh deep snow. And so I already had a kind of a basis for comparison for suffering. But and really, to be honest with you, nothing I experienced in the Marine Corps was harder than that one day in terms of effort or risk. And it really kind of shaped my thoughts on this. Is like, you just don't beat your chest. It's like this macho bullshit. It's like, okay, you can talk the talk, but like, can you actually do the thing? And if you're threatened by a woman who can do the same thing you can do or do it better, what does it say about you, right? My wife kind of ran into this when she was down at Paris Island leading the 4th Recruit Training Battalion. And she had gone down there and realized that women were underperforming men in every boot camp graduation category by a significant amount. And with the Marine Corps' kind of premium that we place on marksmanship, she's like, let's start here because, we like to beat our chests and say every Marine's a rifleman. How can we say that when 1/3 of all the women who are coming down here are failing the rifle range and either being sent back home or recycled in training, at great inefficiency and expense to the taxpayer? And, she came home one day, and I was doing a lot more competitive shooting at the time, shooting IDPA matches on weekends. And this is International Defensive Pistol Association, long story. But anyway, it's competitive shooting thing. And she's like, is there any reason like why a woman can't shoot as well as a man? And I was like, funny you asked, because I get my ass handed to me on a weekendly basis by other women in the gun club, right? No, absolutely not. In fact, typically in the Olympics, women, shoot higher on average relative to points than men do. Typically, they're more trainable because they have less bad habits. They're more open to instruction. Like all the rest of it, right? And she's like, man, I think I'm gonna start here. And she went down to the Weapons and Field Training Battalion down there and talked to this colonel who is one of my instructors at Quantico. And she's like, why are 1/3 of the women failing your range? And he's like, well, this is an old, big recon guy with a pretty thick brow. He's just like, nobody's ever asked me that question before. And to his credit, he's like, let's find out together, right?
Good for him.
And so they did some root cause analysis, and they find out that 3 factors were at play. One was the Gollum effect. While men were being told the expectation is for you to shoot expert on this rifle range, women were being told, for the love of God, just fucking pass. Just pass. Just pass. Just don't embarrass me. Just pass the range. Number 2, the male and female barracks down there had different architecture where the men had a lot more hands-on time with their weapons, so they were more familiar with the parts and pieces and shooting, and had a lot more muscle memory from being able to actually get in the different shooting positions and practice that, right? Female barracks didn't support that. And then the third thing was that the female drill instructors were stressing the recruits out at the range. And, having been at the West Coast boot camp for 2 years, I was like, whoa, dog, that's like a safety issue, right? Insulted Marine, loaded weapon, yelling drill instructor is a recipe for some drill instructor getting shot by either a scared, maligned, pissed off, you name the adjective recruit, right? Like, when they touch foot on the range, the drill instructors ought to fade into the background and let the training staff take over entirely. And the other part of it I forgot to mention was that most of the training coaches, who were mostly men at the range, right, the guys with the pith helmets on, just thought chicks can't shoot. So if my promotion is tied to how many shooters get passed, and I've got a male recruit here and a female recruit here, well, fuck, man, I'm going to spend more time training the male recruit because he's going to get expert, right? Or I'm going to get higher scores. I don't know, there's not as many of them, and I'm just going to write that off, right? And they adjusted that, and within 4 months, had the women shooting as well or better than the men, right? So, I mean, all because, people were operating under the assumption chicks can't shoot, right?
Yeah. And I think there's a good lesson to be learned in all of that. Just in the masculinity side is don't underassume, don't put your biases on other people. And so I came up with my own definition around intelligent masculinity, or
Yeah.
my own thesis around it, which is that it's the refusal to outsource our accountability onto others, and the discipline to live with the consequences of our values and actions.
Yeah.
And it's more of a guiding post of
Mhm.
how do we shape the decisions that we make and what we do in our life to grow from it.
Yeah.
And what you talked about fits in with that definition, and how it, and where you see masculinity, especially in that story for me, is like all it took was a question. And then
Yeah.
all it took after that was the the guy who might have been the least likely that we would have thought in this story, the commander,
Mhm.
to respond positively, because they don't always.
Yeah.
He could have taken a lot of offense to that and gone really defensive, but instead he just asked a simple question of, or he's made the simple statement of, let's go find out together.
Together.
And that really is intelligent masculinity in a lot of ways, is
Mhm.
let's go find out together
Yeah.
and move forward. And so growing on that is, how would you model that type of masculinity, or how do you model that type of masculinity in your own life? Even without
Yeah.
having known the definition before, you probably do a lot of the things for it.
Yeah. I think, I'm a huge neuroscience nerd too, so bear with me here for a second. Like James Baldwin, right, the civil rights activist who I think is an underappreciated son of the American experience. Like I love this guy. It said we're trapped in history, and history's trapped in us, right? And he's right. Like scientifically, we all arrive at this moment based on everything we've experienced, our biases, good or bad, and that's the lens through which we look at the world and also hallucinate our individual realities, right? Because like our brains don't have direct access to the environment. We interpret it through our senses. Our senses only have certain amounts of information. We don't see objective truth. We see the world not as it is. We see the world as it was useful to our ancestors, right? Anthropologically, right?
Mhm.
And so much of our history isn't even our own. So we've got like DNA history, how our brains are coded based on what was useful and kept our ancestors alive. In group affiliations, like that's classic example is like, we're living in a hunter-gatherer tribe of 200 people or so. A good survival rule is to assume anyone who's not in our tribe is a threat until we can prove them safe, right? That assumption, smart for hunter-gatherers, can really trip us up in the modern workplace, where we just assume everyone who's not like us is a threat, right? Or we promote people based on similarity, not based on merit. So we think through that, like, we've got our cultural history, we've got our family history, all that influences like how we see the world. And I try to be aware of like my own personal biases, and biases aren't necessarily a bad thing, right? We all have preference, just a preference for something or not for something. It's when we're unconscious of our biases, or we allow that to, we kind of over leverage them. We say, okay, this is the right thing, right? Instead of a thing or a way to see the world, this is the right way to see the world. Some things are, I think, more objectively true, like murder probably is bad, right? Like I think most people can agree on that. But other things are more just kind of like a difference of style or culture or way of doing things, and it's just kind of like that's a way of doing things. So as the first off, I try to like ask myself, like, if I feel a strong feeling for something or against something, what's behind that, right? Because our emotions are signals from our brain that something in our environment might be connected to our survival. It's probably a good way to think of emotions. Anytime you have a strong emotional reaction, you probably ought to investigate it a little bit, right? And say, like, what's coming up? What's driving that? And what do I want to do with it? Because if we don't, then we just kind of suffer the consequences, right? And I can't tell you how many, especially like analytical men, I coach in my practice, can't name the emotions that they're feeling, right? And I'll be like, well, when your boss said that to you, what are you feeling? Well, I felt bad. Okay, can you describe to me what bad is? Then I'll get a story or a narrative or a process. Well, he did this, and then it's like, well, okay, I want to point out something here. Like, I asked you how you're feeling, and you gave me a history of what happened. what's coming up for you, right? And sometimes it's still, I can tell that they're not connecting with it. And I'll literally pull up Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions. And if you haven't seen it, it's a fantastic tool.
Oh,
And
I
I'm like,
love the feelings wheel. I
yeah, it
love
was like,
those things.
pick out the words that are most closely related to what you experienced in that meeting with your boss. And they're like, I felt disgust. I'm like, boom, like now we can do something with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I felt angry. Okay, anger is the emotion for my way is blocked. Now we can do something with that, right? I'm a big believer in Dan Siegel's work. And he said, in order to like properly and effectively regulate our emotions so that we maintain the relationships that are important in our lives, we've got to be able to name it, to tame it, especially when it's a negative emotion, right? And he's like, if you can't name the emotion you're contending with, how can you possibly contend with it? How can you possibly make a different decision about what to do with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I mean, it's kind of like, and then how do you reframe it, right? Like if I'm feeling ashamed, right, and I could say that, now the thing that was clouding my vision and my lens on the world, I can put it out here, kind of study it a little bit, and say, okay, well, what's driving that shame? Is that something I own? Is that something from my background? Is that something that other people are imposing on me that's not justified, right? And then if I could do that and kind of calm my fight or flight stimulator or reaction to it, then I can do something about it, right? I can make a different decision that's going to bring better things into my life. So yeah.
Yeah, and I love that. It's all reflective, it's all growth oriented, but it's
Yeah.
also you're not blaming yourself. You're not or blaming others for having emotions. You're trying to get them to understand how to talk about them and
Yeah,
how to
it's how we
action
make
on them.
decisions. Like
Yeah.
they've done some studies, like the neuroscience is really interesting on this because like they found that people have had brain damage to the parts of the brain that regulate and recognize emotions. They have
Mm.
really hard times making decisions. When presented with two different options, they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
They really struggle. So I mean, like, um,
Well, and having those words, a lot of men aren't taught them. And that's on
yeah,
purpose. That's not an accidental thing, is men are not taught the right words as
yeah,
boys, and we're taught to run away from those words. We're only
or
given happy,
punished.
mad, sad.
Yeah, or punished for expressing them. Like, sadness is I've lost something that's meaningful to me, so the natural reaction is to cry. And
Hmm.
if you're told boys don't cry, stop that, right?
Yeah.
You're denying a human being an important aspect of what it means to be a human being,
Yeah.
right? Lamenting an important thing that you've lost is an important part of being a healthy human.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
the only emotions that you've been rewarded for, praised for, are like rage and dominance, then what are you going to express as a man, right? Like,
Hmm. That's going to be
yeah,
your expression point, is
yeah,
rage and dominance, which
mhm,
sucks.
yeah,
So building on that, is a lot of that is very reflective sounding. Is what is one of your favorite ways to self-reflect or self-evaluate so that you can grow and you can process your emotions or learn from your emotions?
yeah, and I think is like curiosity, right? Like that is the key to so many things in life. Is one, not assuming that you've got a monopoly on the truth, right? Or a monopoly on knowledge. It's kind of like there's a humility in that of like, how could this other person be right? Um, for instance, like if somebody's giving you feedback, especially feedback that stings or
Mm,
maybe hard to hear, right, might not comport with who you believe yourself to be as a person. Our natural impulse is to push back and defend ourselves, right? Um, a friend of mine, Noah Rabinowitz, taught me one time. He said, it's taken a lot of work and it was really hard to do, but I've trained myself and trained my brain that when people offer me feedback, to have my first assumption to be that they're right and then work to disprove it, right? Rather than deny it and then, defend. And that's the difference between like, hey, fuck you, I don't appreciate you saying that to me, is one defensive response. The other one is like, hey, thanks for having the courage to bring this to my attention. And I'm curious, how did you come to that conclusion? Because I can tell this is really you, right? And I want to understand. The latter is going to end up in a fight or, damage relationships and hurt feelings. Or the
yeah.
former, the latter is going to be like, huh, maybe I have something to learn here. Because if somebody's got that perception, to them it's real. right? We all hallucinate our own realities. So,
I like that. We all
yeah,
hallucinate our own realities.
yeah,
I,
that's what
th-
we do.
I think that's a great way to think about it too, is like,
Mhm,
and to remind each other is our reality is separate from everybody else's. We
mhm.
just have to figure out how to put that reality together and
Yeah,
collectively work forward.
yeah, and
Um,
that's what science is telling us about how our brains work, right? We it's not like it's less stimulus response. More than anything, your brain is a prediction engine, right? We're all here because our ancestors um, were adept at pattern recognition and pattern completion and predicting what's going to happen next and being right most of the time, right? So, I mean, um, once you kind of understand that, you realize that like everything you encounter is through the lens of what's coming from inside your body and what you feel, what's coming from outside your body and your senses, all regulated through the lens of your history and selective attention. And that's how we all kind of generate and hallucinate our own reality, right?
I love
And
it.
yeah, in reality is what we both agree is true.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. Like the brain
It's a
is so
common
weird.
hallucination that we all
Yeah,
have, that we all have to figure out. And I do
yeah.
like it. I like that it's because we all make it up. Our brain is interpreting everything for us. So
Oh
we
yeah.
have to figure it out.
And the brain hallucinates shit. Like in the
Yeah,
center
it
where
does.
our optic nerve meets our retina, there's no information, right? What we should see out in front of us are two dark spots of absolutely no information whatsoever. But based on the context around it, your brain naturally fills it in, making its best guess of what's there. And you also, mechanically through your eye, you should see the world upside down. But it
Mhm.
was more useful to the brain to flip that around in your head so that you see things what we consider to be right side up. But like if you look through the lens of the eye, you see the upside down world, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
well, we're in the upside down, literally. Then
we are
uh,
politically. Yeah,
we
fuck
are
yeah.
politically,
Right?
and I think
Yeah,
at the moment, literally now we're going into the upside down. But
yeah.
what we are going to do is we're going to shift here for the last bit of our discussion is our lightning round, our whimsical questions of the
Gotcha.
"I'll make a man out of you." And these ones get you thinking because when I was little or when I was younger, I learned that these are partially about physicality,
Hmm.
but they're also about emotional growth and understanding and learning and how we can apply them to different aspects of our lives. And so let's get into our final section, our lightning round of Mulan's I'll Make a Man Out of You, starting with what does it mean to you to be as swift as a coursing river?
So when I heard this, the first thing that leapt to mind, because I'm a child of the '70s, was Bruce Lee's "Be Like Water" speech. And he's like, water, when it becomes the cup into the cup, it can flow, it can crash. He's like, you like water, my friend. And it was just kind of like, yeah, like don't be static. Adjust, adapt, learn, grow, take different forms and shapes, right? Um, yeah, that kind of resonated with me. And
I like that.
yeah, yeah. So like, yeah, if you haven't seen Bruce Lee's "Be Like Water," it's real short. Totally worth looking up on YouTube, right? Especially if
Okay.
you're into martial arts. It's really good.
That's
Yeah,
awesome. And there's no wrong answers with these. There's only right answers. And
yeah,
I don't push back on any of these for anyone in the audience. These are our lightning round questions. So, next is how do you embody the force of a great typhoon?
yeah. I mean, having lived through several typhoons when I was stationed on the island of Okinawa in Japan, yeah, they're forces of nature and it's wind, right? Wind builds and it builds and builds and builds and builds. And the metaphor, like, when I think about like how do you create change, like meaningful change in society, it's kind of like one person can blow, but if we all blow together, things will start to move, right? And it doesn't take a lot of money to do it. It just takes dedicated people who want to change their community in some meaningful way, whether it's defending your library, whether it's throwing a protest on the National Mall, whether it's um, you know, we had a huge success with the Vet to Vote campaign to get more veterans and their family members to serve as election poll workers. Um, Six friends got together and that year recruited 62,500 people to be election poll workers. That number is well over 160,000 today. I mean, like, and this is just like friends who were just like,
Mm.
yeah, this is a problem. Our democracy is important, and we know 14 million Americans who served that would be willing to volunteer if they were asked. And if we ask their families, we can probably 3x that number, right? So yeah, like when people get together, it's like that African proverb above. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Yeah, I think that's important. Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Next question. How are you as strong as a raging fire? And this
Yeah.
one, I will preface, or I will clause this one a little bit for
Mhm.
you, is what I've found too is to describe it, is to, in my opinion anyways, a raging fire is controlled.
Yeah.
And that's all. And I'll leave you with that, in my
Yeah. No,
opinion.
I love it. When I read that, the thing that leapt to mind was like, um, George Washington has a quote about the dangers of standing armies, and he says, like, it's it's like fire, right? It is a useful servant and a dangerous master. And the same thing is kind of like, you can cook your food with fire and bring nutrients into your body. You can burn your huts down, and be homeless. So it's kind of like, to me, this says like, great power comes great responsibility, and the value of forbearance. Just because you can do something probably doesn't mean you should. To give great thought to that.
You can also burn an igloo down. I know that from
Yeah,
Boy Scouting experience.
yeah.
Some of the kids in my Boy Scout troop burned an igloo down.
Oh man,
So
we could
you can
trade.
do that.
We could trade stories about stuff that happened in the Boy Scouts, man.
Oh, we should sometime.
Yeah,
That would be fun. I have
yeah,
some. Boy Scouts was an adventure. I'll say
yeah.
that.
I had a great time with it. Yeah.
Oh
Mercifully,
yeah,
like most of my troop leaders were Vietnam vets, and they were fantastic. We had a great time. So
yeah. And I'm saddened at what has happened to the Boy Scouts in their sexual assault and abuse
mm,
stuff and the way they handled it. But that's a separate conversation.
that,
Finally,
yeah,
how are you as mysterious as the dark side of the moon?
yeah, like Walt Whitman's quote about, so I contradict myself, I'm full of multitudes, kind of came to mind with that. And it's just kind of like, yeah, we all have the side of us that we show the world. We have the side of us that we hold back from the world. There's a side of us that we don't show, that maybe only our deepest friends know, right? And I think that's not a bad thing. To always kind of keep a little part of yourself just for yourself, sometimes is not a bad thing. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's great. Um, and with that little bit of keeping some things to yourself so that you have a little bit of mystery about
Yeah,
yourself, keep yourself a little private, is I also like to go to the next step, is how do we promote each other so that that mystery is harder to find sometimes, because you get to see more of Joe.
yeah.
So Joe,
Well,
one,
I,
thank you
I
for
hope
coming on. This has been really amazing.
you too,
Again,
man.
a wonderful discussion.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed our conversations. I look forward to future ones. Yeah, look me up. I'm on LinkedIn. I am on Substack, and also on Blue Sky. So I dumped Twitter. It's just gonna do it anymore.
It's a cesspool.
Yeah, but yeah, come find me there at Joe Plenzler. I think on Blue Sky, I've adopted my family nickname of Saint Terrificus. There's a long story behind that. The joke in Latin is terrificus means the opposite of terrific. It's like awful. But there's a whole long Polish Catholic story that's behind it that I won't get into here. But yeah,
I love that. I look forward to hearing that story sometime.
when you're the dark sheep of the family, man, you get nicknames.
Hey, we got to have some fun and some
Yeah.
stories about our families. That's what makes family interesting.
For sure.
And so, thank you everyone for being here in the audience. Thank you, Joe, again for being with me. This was a lot of fun again. And if you are catching this live on Tuesday, March 3rd, and you are in a state that is actively voting for a primary, go vote. Go do your civic duty. Go make your voice heard, because it's super important to do so. And if you don't let your voice be heard, someone else will fill that void for you.
And volunteer for elections. Yep.
Yeah. And so that's our call to action, is go vote when you have the opportunities, go volunteer to care for the elections, to guard the elections, to run the election, run the polling place, be a part of the process. Go volunteer, go do something good, because we are done being sick of the shit here, and we're doing this shit. So everyone, thanks again. Have a wonderful day, and I will see y'all next time for another intelligent masculinity discussion. Thanks, Joe. Have a great day.
You too.